All right, friends, Stephen Bennun here with Israeli News Live. We are covering, as of right now, this is going to be the appropriations for health and human services. We are covering this meeting live. It is happening in Florida today. There are going to be a large number of lobbyists that are fighting to keep the notorious Florida free kill law active, and of course there are just a handful of families that have suffered as a result of this law that has caused a tremendous problems for one second, if you can bear with me just for a second.
Hey, good morning, everyone. The Appropriations Committee on HHS will now come to order. Robin, would you please call the roll?
Chair Trumbull.
Here.
Vice Chair Davis. Here. Senator Berman. Senator Broder. Here. Senator Burton.
Okay, roll call has started now. We are looking at the Wrongful Death Act of Florida Statute 768.21. It is truly an egregious bill that was started 35 years ago, and the fight has begun again to try to overturn this. Many families that have been trying to tell their stories, trying to get lawmakers in Florida to overturn this egregious law, and we are covering this live.
A couple of bills on the agenda today, and we'll start with tab 1 with Senator Burgess. You are recognized to explain Senate Bill 398, Awareness Programs for Alzheimer's Disease and Dementia-Related Disorders. You recognize, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill creates a statewide public health awareness campaign through the Department of Elder Affairs to educate Floridians about Alzheimer's and related dementias. Florida has the second highest number of Alzheimer cases in the U.S., with over 580,000 Floridians.
What we'll do right now, they're talking about an Alzheimer's case. You can see my wife, Jana, and Dr. Teresa Mahaffey in the background here, along with many of the other ladies here who are there representing their families. We've talked about some of these before. The lady directly behind my wife, also a very, very powerful advocate. I think her name is Miss Davis, if I remember right. I do have some notes here. So while we're waiting for this to get started, I've been told that my wife was sharing with me last night that there are going to be a lot of the lobbyists there today testifying because they had such. That was Sabrina Davis, by the way, that was sitting behind her there. But they're going to have a lot of lobbyists in today because they were shocked to find out that both the House and the Senate had voted to rescind or overturn this Florida's Wrongful Death Act, notoriously known as the Florida Free Kill Law. And after 35 years, they had, in fact, in the Senate, they had unanimous 18-0 in favor of overturning this law. So there is definitely going to be some powerful people out today really trying to persuade the people to overturn it. And sadly, one of the things that I brought up myself to my wife on this issue is that I said, think about it, you have these lobbyists who basically give money, large sums of money, to these politicians here, and they're out there, they're promoting, promoting these different lawmakers with money, but yet they're really not the people that vote in the lawmakers. These lawmakers they are voted in the state of Florida by Floridians, by the everyday voter, by the people that are impacted by this law. And by the way, if you're 25 years or older, you're not married, you don't have any children under the age of 25, and you you die as a result of malpractice in the state of Florida, well, guess what? There's no recourse for your family. If let's say if you're young and you have surviving parents and they're trying to get justice for what has happened to you, Florida has made it to where you cannot get any compensation whatsoever. We ran into the same situation with my father-in-law, Stefan Suto, who died. Let me see here. We may be coming to it. Hang on one second.
You are recognized to explain Senate Bill 714.
Thank you, Chair. Senate Bill 714 provides for non-opioid advance directives which empower patients by allowing them to notify healthcare professionals.
Okay, we'll pause that for a minute. It's a different bill as of right now. But what it does is that your family, like in the case of our father-in-law, Stefan Suto, when he was clearly, in fact, beyond malpractice in his case was ruled by Dr. Daniel Schultz as a homicide. Now, I say ruled, that's the finding of the pathologist. It's not a ruling in a court of law. However, in Tennessee, where Carrie Madej participated in starting off this, not just reckless, but as some doctors, even Sherry Timpany called it, a major overdose of peroxide, 21 mils of peroxide, where there was absolutely nothing for that, right? So they ruled, that her actions were extremely reckless. And the judge there is also working on punitive damages. So now we're here in the state of Florida, and let's see what we have here.
Thank you. My comments on the amendment are, I guess, under informational. It says you've deleted lines 44 to 51.
I think we're still dealing with a different case altogether. We have Ethan right behind there, our son, that's also speaking today. And he is a brilliant young man. He's, some people think he should be a lawyer. He has different aspirations in life for college. He's wanting to pursue conducting. But anyway, he's done an amazing job in researching the records. You'll hear a little bit about this today and getting the records released, the public records. I think he's going to talk a little bit about that because of the fact of cover-ups that go on. Majorly, there's a lot of cover-ups that happen. I'm not really sure what Dr. Mahaffey is going to be speaking about today, but what's really going to slap the lobbyist here is that they're so used to having their doctors come up in favor of this law, saying that it's going to raise rates for malpractice in the state of Florida by overturning this law, which so far they've not been able to prove that. In fact, when they put the law into effect, they can prove that the rate of malpractice insurance never went down. It did not decrease. So beforehand, so how can you say it's going to increase? But anyway, they love to parade doctors in their lab coats there to make it look like, gosh, this is horrible. Well, Dr. Mahaffey decided to do the same thing. She decided to wear her lab coat because she is a doctor. She is a pediatrician in the state of Florida. Her husband is a surgeon in the state of Florida. And you're going to find that they are for accountability and wanting this law overturned as well. So no, not all doctors are going to side with the lobbyists in the state of Florida there. So this is going to be very interesting, and like I said, I know that different people have different stories here, and let's see what we have next.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, Tony Larch with the Florida College of Emergency Physicians. Thank you very much. That is all I have for appearance forms on the amendment. Is there debate on the amendment? Seeing no debate, you recognize to close. Without objection, we'll show that amendment is adopted. We're back on the bill as amended. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, we'll move to public testimony. Linda Bell. You're recognized.
Good morning, Linda Bell, President of Florida Right to Life. We rise in opposition to this bill. I've taken a good look at it. While it's a nice short one, and I appreciate that, there are a lot of concerns here, and I was taking a look through the Journal of American Medicine, the JAMA Health Forum, and they point out from an article from 2022 dangers of eliminating opioid medication in surgery. And I'm a little concerned and confused on the need for this bill, because we're not finding opioid abuse in the hospital. We're not finding opioid abuse in emergency situations. We're certainly not finding opioid abuse when you're having a surgery, a necessary surgery. And where this could come into play with great abuse is somebody who is incapacitated, can't speak for themselves, and maybe they thought at one time that this was a good idea. Well, the opioids, they not only reduce pain, but they make the surgery go far better. And I'll read to you something that was straight from JAMA, from the Journal of American Medicine. And it says, recent studies have upended the hypothesis that avoiding all opioid drug inoperatively by using alternative medications can safely yield similar pain control and less opioid consumption after surgery. A randomized clinical trial had to be stopped prematurely because of a higher number of serious safety events among the group that received no opioids. Without opioid medication, patients more frequently experience bradycardia and hypoxemia during surgery. Second, a systematic review of existing literature found no evidence to favor the complete elimination of.
We're still waiting for the subject of Florida's free kill law to get started here, which should be starting momentarily. So we will, if you can just bear with us, I know it is this morning that this is taking place. So I expect it to be coming up very shortly. And I'm not sure who all will be there today speaking. You know, there during the fight that was happening 2 weeks ago, there were a number of very important people sharing their testimonies, including that of Sabrina Davis and Daryl Parrott. You know, I didn't get all the names there, but there was at least about I'd say about 8 different families. A lot of other families that have been affected by this law, but these are people that have taken up that fight. I know that Sabrina Davis, her father, went into the hospital and with some leg pain, and they pretty much just dismissed him. He even says to his daughter, he says, you know, I could be laying here with a blood clot in my leg, and they're not doing anything about it. Well, that's why she is fighting this law, because her father did die of I think it was a 9-inch blood clot in his leg that ended up taking his life. Let's see where we're at now.
You never mentioned a recovering addict who's going through surgery and wishes to direct their opioid use during surgery. Why is that?
That person has every right to request to their physician when they enter. When you have a procedure, any type
the
of
senator that just spoke, I believe, is who my wife met yesterday, and my son. Amazing man. He is from Jackson, representative of Jacksonville, I believe, and he both alcohol. He was living on the streets, homeless at one time, if I understand right, and he overcome drugs and alcohol. He's been sober now for 27 years.
Addiction comes later. When you have more opioids than you need or more opiates than you should, then that is just a normal reduction. Then bring it down. In fact, the JAMA article actually discusses that rather than eliminate the opioid use, just reduce it. So there is an answer to that as well. You don't need to throw out the proverbial baby with the bathwater when you can fix it by just doing a reduction, or maybe for that one person. But why have one bill, a one-size-fits-all bill, for the occasion of some person or persons who maybe are coming off of an addiction. That can be dealt on an individual basis without a sweeping, broad-based bill that applies to everybody. As a matter of fact, barely 3%, I'm sorry.
With all due respect, Dr. David E. Smith, in an article entitled The Epidemiology of Addiction, said that addiction is the psychobiological predisposition of a susceptible host for developing a dependence when exposed to a psychoactive drug. Exposure can be voluntary or involuntary. Exposure is the key behind this bill. Would you agree?
You're recognized.
To a point, the psychotropic drugs or drugs that any type of drug that's going to alleviate pain, while that person is experiencing pain, and you're talking about a very specific incident, studies have shown that barely 3% on the lower end and only up to 10% on the higher end ever experience any type of level of addiction when it comes to opioid use that is in a medical emergency or medical procedure. It's very rare to have an opioid abuse or a problem when it comes from a medically necessary operation, procedure, or that when pain is alleviated, the body relaxes. The body is tense when the body's in pain, and it will produce a very profoundly bad result without that use. So we're not endorsing opioid use by any means outside of this medical setting. We're specifically talking about a medical setting. If there is somebody who is an addict or a recovering addict, then that person certainly has a right to decline whatever they want. But we're talking about a bill that would basically create this network of so-called opioid abuse in medical procedures, in medical surgeries, where it really just doesn't exist.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I think we have one more question for you,
Just
Vice
really
Chair Davis.
quickly.
Yes, ma'am.
The references to some of the information you presented to us, the study that you read from this morning, could you share that with us?
I certainly could. It's from the Journal of American Medicine. It's the JAMA review, and this was a study from 2022.
One thing, let me remind you as we're watching, right now they're talking about opioids in Florida, but let me remind you, if you live in Florida, call your senators, call your House representatives, and let them know what you think about this free kill law in the state of Florida.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Dr. Diane Gowski. I'm the current president of the Florida Catholic Medical Association, also a member of the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, who did put out an action alert against this bill in Florida. The bill is unnecessary and misleading. I think, patients can say, oh, this sounds like a good bill, non-opioid, but they're assuming that if there was a reason or that this bill did become enacted, that there are non-opioid alternatives that will be able to control their pain and take care of them when they need it. That is not always the case. There are many scenarios, traumas, fractures, surgeries, pain, subacute pain, chronic pain. There's lots of scenarios where a non-opioid alternative is not going to do it. And those scenarios don't all fit into the exemption that you have that we already kind of discussed. My dad was a narcotics detective in New York City, and so he was obviously against heroin. And so I think that if he had been given this advance directive, sorry, if he was still alive, and he went to his doctor's office and I wasn't there, he would have probably, signed non-opioid, advance directive. But let's say he became incapacitated. He did have open heart surgery. They opened up his sternum. They wired it back together. He, required oral opioid drugs for a period of time. And again, that's not in the setting of an emergency. So I think this bill blocks the treatment options for doctors that are available to them to help patients with pain management and palliative care. It's voluntary for the patient, but it's actually a mandate to the doctor. It's saying you must use opioid alternatives. You cannot use an opioid. even if it's in your clinical judgment for the patient. So really, I think, the idea is to promote optimal use of opioids, optimize them, but not eliminate them. And we've talked about the JAMA article where complete elimination of the opioid drugs really does preclude best surgical care. So also, it was interesting to me that this bill included palliative care, not just pain management. And, there's scenarios where this could definitely result in the earlier push from patients from palliative care to hospice care. If they're incapacitated and they can't get opiates, the doctor can, maybe unintentionally, but say, well, we can get you opioids under hospice care. Why don't we move you to hospice care sooner? And again, it may not be appropriate. I remember I had one patient, I worked for 20 years as a hospitalist, so we did a lot of pain management and of all types. So I had a little old lady, she had metastatic breast cancer with some bony metastases.
While we're waiting for them to start on the free kill law, let me
They had her on
just remind those of you that are listening here, the video I did yesterday,
immediate release morphine. And so
and I'm going to pull it up so I make sure I got it,
very well at home with low dose
and that is
your exception. Pain also
the
is
truth about Syria
the only objective
and Christian persecution.
standard of care.
That's a nice way of speaking about genocide. And something that really came on my heart after I did this broadcast yesterday is, as I was looking at these Syrian Christians, one thing that most people do not even consider is that the Syrian Christians are, in effect, the house of Israel. You are looking, when you see Syrian Christians, you are looking at the true Israelites, the descendants of the true Israelites of 2,000 years ago. That dispersed group of the house of Israel. If you recall, I'm going to actually do a video on this. I'll probably share it on Patreon, though, going into the depth of who these people really are, because it's something that a lot of people just are not even thinking about to begin with. So I think it's really important that that people know that what's going on, and
I appreciate listening to my concerns, and I hope you
that they realize what's going on. Listen, we may be going to it now. Let me see here.
Senator, you recognize.
Thank you. I can't believe this bill has taken this long. This is a voluntary directive, and I will remind physicians that the treatment is about the patient, not about the physician and what they want. If you're a recovering addict and you're somebody that believes that you may be predisposed to some kind of addiction, I will tell you we are up here year after year after year, and every single tool that we can give to somebody to battle that, especially before it happens, we're going to do it. The notion that says that opioid addiction doesn't happen in the hospital is like saying drunk drivers aren't found in a bar. Well, no kidding, but that's where it starts. And so we are going to vote for this. We're going to make sure that patients have every opportunity to decline that because this is voluntary. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Broder. Anybody else?
I like his
Senator Rousseau.
comment.
I ditto what Senator Broder just said.
Senator Harrell.
Thank you very much. And I also agree with that, having run a medical practice for many, many years, that discussion needs to take place between the physician and the patient, and that's the patient's choice, the patient's option. If the patient chooses not to have treatment for a particular illness, that's the patient's choice. If they choose not to have a particular drug, that is the patient's choice, as long as we are not going down the med-mal issue with it. And the emergency room situation is a different situation, and I believe that amendment solves that problem. We don't want to hold physicians accountable for situations that they didn't know about. So if you're in an emergency situation and you have no means of knowing this, the patient is unconscious, and you're doing what you need to do to save that life at that point, that's a different situation. But an advance directive tells the doctor exactly what the patient expects and would have as their appropriate treatment. Every patient has that right, and this is just confirming that.
Anyone else? Seeing none, Senator Burton, you recognize close.
Thank you, and certainly what the senators on the panel today have said in regard to the debate are statements that I would have made as well. So I thank them for that. And
This senator that you see right now, she was their last hearing over the law here on the, I so typically call it the Florida Free Kill Law, but it's actually the Wrongful Death Act 768.21. And she voted to overturn it. So really thankful for that, and I'm sure she'll continue that same stance today. So it is going to be very interesting just to see the lobbyists that have come today to fight against the everyday citizens of Florida. Not to say that they're not citizens themselves, but as one person pointed out in last week's hearing on this, all these lobbyists are paid to be there. They're paid to say what they're saying. They're paid to go against this bill. They fund and they send donations to these senators and congressmen or House members in the Florida House there. And the Senate there, they help fund their campaigns. But, you know, funding the campaign only puts you out before the people. At the end of the day, it's the people. It's the everyday people that vote. And, of course, it's the everyday people that are being affected by this egregious law, the Florida Free Kill Law, that is notoriously known as, called the Florida Wrongful Death Statute, that really does need to be overturned, so that families that are grieving could get justice. I have watched now my wife for 3 years suffer in ways that you could not even begin to imagine. She has complex PTSD diagnosed with that, and she has truly gone through an enormous suffering as a result, and financially as well. It has been tremendously high financially to our family. We have certainly paid a heavy price in that area as well, trying to get justice, especially when you're dealing with a situation where you can't get justice. Then you have to pay for it. You have to pay everything. You know, you have to fight, and it costs money to do that fight. Just like now, the expense to go back and forth to Florida to speak before the House here, and this doesn't even guarantee that this law would help us. It might, because there is a possibility that statute of limitations may not be fully expired under certain conditions. But as a general rule, most people that are fighting this right now in the state of Florida, they'll never see any justice whatsoever. And at least with justice, you can feel like finally that someone has heard your voice and the wrong that has happened to your loved one.
That if somebody is diagnosed with autism and that diagnosis takes place, that they should be covered once they reach the age of 18 and beyond as well. Pretty simply, this supports families, supports Floridians who are autistic to make sure that they are.
And by the way, I know we're about to go to this very soon here, because I saw the senator that is representing this bill step forward to the front of the audience. They're getting ready to come up and speak next.
To ask you this before. On line 88 at the bill, it talks about that the lifetime benefits can't exceed $108,000 in total. So under Medicaid right now, are there caps on qualified home and community-based services? And what happens when these, and especially if you exceed the cap when you're still a child, how is that going to play out? I know that's not a change in your bill, but since we are expanding the eligible pool of individuals, I'm wondering how that cap will play into that over their lifetime.
Senator Burton, sorry.
Over here. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Berman, for that question. As you noted, this is not a change to current statute. It would potentially create more individuals eligible to reach that cap, but it doesn't anticipate a change in the cap.
Any other questions? Seeing no other questions, we will move to public testimony. I've got Kai Robinson. Doesn't say waiving or in support or against, just says without compensation. So, Rebecca Guthers. Maybe they're on a different committee. Rain Johnson.
By the way, you probably have already noticed the voice is off a bit on the live coverage coming out of Tallahassee as of right now. And this video, by the way, does get recorded as well. So what I'll probably do is edit this down to where we are just on the subject that we're covering today, the Wrongful Death Act. I think they're moving on to that now. I see the senator at the podium that'll be that sponsored this bill.
Garcia, Senator Gruters, Senator Harrell, Senator Rodriguez, Senator Roussan, Vice Chair Davis, Chair Trumbull.
Yes. Senators by your vote will show CS for Senate Bill 756 is reported favorably. We are going to stand in informal recess. Oh, no, never mind. Clay's here. Next, we're going to go to tab 3, Senate Bill 734 on actions for recovery of damages for wrongful death. Senator Yarborough, you recognize, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Trumbull and members of the committee. As background on this bill, in 1990, an expansion was made to the class of survivors entitled to recover non-economic damages for general cases of wrongful death. The expansion allowed a decedent's adult children to recover non-economic damages if there is no surviving spouse. The expansion also allowed the parents of an adult decedent to recover non-economic damages if there is no surviving spouse or surviving minor or adult children. However, the same law in 1990 that allowed these expansions related to general cases of wrongful death also included exceptions that non-economic damages could not be recovered by certain individuals if a wrongful death occurs due to medical negligence. Specifically, Florida Statute 768.218 contains exceptions that prohibit certain parents and children of a deceased patient who dies due to medical negligence from recovering non-economic damages. While a well-intended motive to mitigate increases in medical malpractice insurance premiums accompanied the effort to enact the exceptions, those exceptions singled out a narrow group of survivors who cannot recover non-economic damages in the case of a wrongful death due to medical negligence, even though the same damages can be recovered by survivors for a wrongful death that is caused by all other forms of negligence. The exceptions run counter to the spirit behind the legislative intent created in Florida's Wrongful Death Act in 1972, which reads verbatim in Statute 768.17, quote, "It is the public policy of the state to shift the losses resulting when wrongful death occurs from the survivors of the decedent to the wrongdoer," close quote. The legislative intent is clear. It was placed in law nearly 20 years before the exceptions at issue were placed in law and is still on the books. Senators, I filed SB 734 because the current exceptions in the subsection are unjust and they prevent accountability. This is in no way a knock against the medical profession or anyone in it, because Florida has some of the best healthcare providers and institutions in the country and beyond. I do not have a statistic to quote, but I will venture to say we likely have a low single-digit percentage of those in Florida's healthcare community that have issues with malpractice or negligence. While we all understand no amount of money can bring back a loved one, to solely argue from a monetary or economic perspective would be misplaced, because no individual and no institution is above accountability, which is exactly what this bill is about. Chair Trumbull and members, that is the bill.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senators, are there questions? Vice Chair Davis, you recognize.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Senator, this is the second stop of this bill, and so just kind of reviewing some things that happened in your first stop, some of the comments that were made by speakers this bill would limit access to care. It would increase medical malpractice insurance premiums, and it would force doctors to leave the state. Just with those comments being made, how do you see this bill being different and not putting those things in place?
Recognize, sir.
Chair, thank you. Thank you, Senator Davis, and through the chair to Senator Davis and the committee. I am aware of those comments, Senator Davis, and understand the perspective from which they come. I would say that what we have is not only a bill about accountability, as I've described, but it's also a value of life. In Florida, we stand for life, obviously, and it should not be based on someone's age, the age of their children, or their marital status as to whether accountability can be pursued and obtained if there is an act of negligence, because it basically leaves, even though there is a decedent and that person is no longer here, if there was wrongdoing, there is no accountability for that. So it's a balance between trying to, obviously we don't want to increase costs in our healthcare space. And again, we have great individuals who work in our healthcare profession, but we also need to have accountability, and it leaves essentially the survivors holding that bag. And that's why I brought up the legislative intent that was put in place when the Wrongful Death Act was created in 1972. It's the intent, the public policy intent of the state, which I know is not binding, it's a statement, but it amplifies that if there is wrongdoing, then that loss, that burden shouldn't remain with the survivors. It should be shifted to the wrongdoer. So again, I think it would be a low number. I don't have any statistics to quote, and this law has been on the books for 35 years now. So some say it could be 100 a year, some say it could be 500 or 1,000 a year. We heard that in committee last time too, but we don't truly know. But the thing at the end of the day is we need accountability. It's about value of life, and it shouldn't be, it's a line drawn to where everyone else can seek to recover except those that fall into this narrow category of survivors.
Follow up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So last year's bill was a little bit different than this one. So this year's bill, it feels like there's a full repeal of what you were trying to do last year, minus, I guess, some caps. I wanted to talk to us about what's the difference between what you were doing last year with that bill and where we fall today with what feels like a complete repeal of the
What you see is you're finding these senators are under a lot of pressure by the lobbyists and those that fund their campaigns to not vote for this bill.
Both for the practitioners and for our facilities. And so what we have before us today is just a clean repeal. It doesn't have any caps on the damages. I've told stakeholders, I told the Judiciary Committee a couple of weeks ago and mentioned last year as we were working through this, I'm very open to other ways we can try to mitigate the liability impacts on this, but at the root of it for me is the bill that you have in front of you in its pure form with the repeal, and that's something I've tried to be very transparent about with our stakeholders on all sides of this issue. But if we have enough support to do some other mitigating factors into the bill, I'm very open to that, and will continue to be.
Any other senators? Senator Harrell?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the many conversations we've had over the last day or so, and I appreciate your concern. I have many, many questions, but I'll just start with the one on medical malpractice and the impact on that. Do you have any numbers, and can you tell us where Florida sits in what medical malpractice costs are currently in the state of Florida?
Chair, thank you. Through the chair to Senator Harrell and the committee. I don't have statistics and numbers in front of me, Senator Harrell. I have heard those in both our business and medical communities say, and I believe you'll probably hear again today shortly, that we're the highest in the nation, but I've also heard that we're not the highest in the nation. So I've really heard information from all sides of that suggest we are, that suggest we aren't. I don't have numbers in front of me right now to quote to you.
Thank you. I'm very concerned about this. We started in 1990. The changes originally took place there. And I know we've had some conversation on who would be the beneficiary of this. And it's my understanding from our texts and also our comments that it would only be the children or the parents of an individual. Would it also, it would not include the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren? And also, what about a child who hasn't had contact with their parent for, say, 10 years? We have many situations like that. And would they be eligible for this type of award?
Chair, thank you. I heard maybe a 2 or 3 part question there, Senator Harrell. As far as grandchildren, great-grandchildren, there's nowhere I know of in statute, unless I'm wrong, I'll defer to smarter minds, where we allow them to recover in a case like this for a wrongful death, especially related to malpractice. And that would not be the case under this bill, too, if we repeal it. It would only be the parent of an adult child who had no surviving spouse or minor children at the time of their death. And it would also be for the adult child who had a parent who had no surviving spouse or other minor children at the time of their death as well. So it's that narrow group. It doesn't extend to extended family, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren. Can you repeat the last part of the question you just had?
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Yes. What if somebody hasn't had any contact with their parent and they've been living in Michigan for the last 10 years and they're estranged from their parent? Would they still be able to get this award?
Chair, thank you. So if they fall into that category like we just talked about, if this is lifted, if this is repealed, if they are one of those allowable family members who is able to recover, then the answer would be yes. What I will tell you, as I did last night when we spoke on the phone, that's the part I don't like, because it doesn't sit well with me or make me feel good that a longtime estranged family member who's in another state, or even if they're here in Florida, finds out that someone passed away, and now maybe I have a right under the law to do that, and they go and file a claim, perhaps not for those right reasons that we would agree on. So I agree. I don't know how else to balance this unless, again, we have an openness from the majority of the colleagues we serve with here and across the building to get us to a different place on that, but I'm still open to it. And I share your concern on that point, Senator Harrell.
Thank you. One more question, Mr. Chair. On the accountability side, are you familiar with the Board of Medicine and the 3 strikes and you're out ability and requirement on physicians?
Through the chair, yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar? Do you know the responsibility that's built into the system?
Where she's talking about that 3 strikes and you're out, if I'm not mistaken, she's talking about the medical board. And sadly to say, the families have no say in those hearings. They're closed-door meetings.
Through the chair, my understanding, and if I'm wrong on this, I'll stand corrected. My understanding is that's not a guaranteed process that must happen if there is an allegation of medical negligence or malpractice. But in the case of an action being filed in the judicial process, then it does trigger a review to where the Board of Medicine will then review it and can ascertain whether they also believe that was an act of negligence. And then at that point, that's when 3 strikes kicks in and other penalties that apply under law can kick in. But it's not something that automatically happens as it stands today with this law in place, especially for that group of people.
Follow up on that one. Does it not include a complaint made by an individual against a particular physician?
Through the chair, they can certainly file a complaint, but there's not the same opportunity to go through the judicial process like everybody else has in the case of any other form of negligence. And so it
He's right. When you do it that way there, like right now, the Florida doctors that we've dealt with, it's been under investigation. These doctors are fighting it. They've brought their attorneys. We're not allowed to see anything, hear anything. We don't have any input other than our initial report. So there is no justice in that. And if you've already bought off everybody, you definitely don't have any justice. And you'll hear from Ethan today. I think Ethan is going to present some of that evidence of the cover-ups that are going on in the state of Florida.
It automatically triggers that review. That it would be great if that happened anyway, but it doesn't always happen.
Thank you.
Senator Burton.
Thank you, and good morning, Senator Yarborough. Thank you for, again, talking to me a little bit about this as well. In a sense, not really a follow-up, but an additional question related to current avenues, if you will, of response to the event or a response to an alleged incident or an incident that is proven to be true. Have you looked at beyond your bill, beyond this judicial route, and beyond a route related to money, quite frankly? Have you looked at statute related to the regulation of practitioners or providers, not just practitioners, but providers in Florida, for perhaps some other remedies that are involving the regulation, involving perhaps some of the questions that maybe we don't have clear enough answers to your point, maybe we don't really know.
I'm very concerned as I listen to some of these statements that they're not wanting to approve it. The pressures on these senators from these big money pockets in the state of Florida is enormous. Although they overcome the hurdle 2 weeks ago,
So the answer is yes.
this is
Last
becoming
year,
more of a challenge
first
today.
iteration of the bill not only had the caps on the damages, but it also had a process through the administrative hearing avenue, somewhat tied to what we're talking about, to where you could only pursue an action if you had already gone through that hearing process, and if there had been the finding that there was, in fact, an act of negligence that had occurred. So we tried to look at a creative way to do that. I appreciate staff's help on that as well. And there are other, I'm sure there's other processes out there in the other states on this. I can't say we've looked at all 50 to see what they're doing, but we did try to find a creative way last year, which is what was before you in judiciary when we started, but we still didn't have enough support for that as well. So still open to it. If you have ideas, I would love to hear those. And the same with other members as well, but we just want to find a way to get there, and at the root of it is the subsection itself, just to be clear.
More questions?
Yes, ma'am.
And then for clarity's sake for everybody, a family member who seeks damages, correct me if I'm wrong, but are they currently eligible for economic damages? Is that true?
Chair, thank you, Senator, that's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions, members? Seeing no other questions, we'll move to public testimony. I have 27 speaker cards and a couple of waiving as well. I realize that the majority of the people speaking probably share a common denominator where they've lost a loved one, so I want to be sensitive of that, and also the fact that people have driven a long way. I would ask that you just keep your comments as succinct as possible. We'll start first, Peter Fennell, and then Bob Johnson's behind him. You recognize, sir.
Peter Fennell, he is a survivor, but an amazing testimony.
This bill forward. Thank you for allowing it to get this far without caps. That is imperative. My cost of care recovery, I'm the victim. What do you call a free kill that fails? I'm asking my lawmakers. His intention was to send me home to die. On the date he tried to discharge me, my condition was acute blood loss, acute perforated duodenal, acute septic shock, peritonitis, and E. coli bacterium. They moved me from a standard room to an observation room. This is all after a colon surgery, just a standard colon surgery. And the man came into my room with his physician's assistant with a big smile on his face, demanding my immediate discharge. The patient will recover better at home. He'll be out of my hair and won't die here, is what it was. As a medical professional, he knew exactly what he was doing. And I'm not standing here just talking about my case and my $1.14 million cost of care recovery. I'm standing here talking for 7 other victims of the same surgeon that I got off of Google reviews. I made contact with 4 others through Facebook. I sent out complaint forms for the Board of Medicine. I sent out my complaint form as an example of how to structure it so they could get the ball rolling. One woman calls me back and says, "Oh my God, this is just like my son's case. Turned his back on a surgical complication. We can't get accountability." That young man is currently in Miami recovering from a small bowel transplant. How much is that going to cost? How much medical care does that young man in his 30s and his beautiful young wife, how much is it going to cost them to recover from a small bowel transplant? I got another young man I'm standing up for in federal court because when he cried for help, nobody listened. 24 years old, came to Florida to go to college. 2020, our economy's open, everything's great. He's starting a new life. He went to a satellite ER to get a note for work. He had an inflammatory bowel issue. He met our doctor. Our doctor for whatever reason, sold him an emergency surgery, told him it was life-threatening. Kid asked for 2 days. Let me talk to my mom. She's a nurse. You don't have time. He went and had surgery. According to them, they got their records. The surgery was then listed as an elective. He went into and never followed elective protocols. He went into a dirty bowel, listed as an elective. The young man went online, crying for help. Nobody listened. He's now in custody for cyber stalking.
Sir, could you bring it in for a landing?
Pardon?
Could you bring it in for a landing, please?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There's zero accountability. I survived this, and I have zero idea of what to call this. And when I come to my lawmakers and I come to the Board of Health for answers, I get nothing because I fall into the free kill category. Please, full repeal without caps.
Thank you, sir. Bob Johnson, and after Mr. Johnson is Alfred Granovius. You recognize, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Bob Johnson. I live in the Villages. I'm a 5-year resident there, retired from the state of Minnesota. I'm speaking in opposition to SB 734 as it's written and presented to you today. Let me start out and just say Florida, you all, and the state and local government and the private sector does a superlative job in the Florida welcome mat. And I'm here because of that welcome mat and the lifestyle, the amenities. But once you move here, then those amenities aren't as high on the list in terms of quality of life, and the healthcare system rises pretty much to the top of the list. And I can tell you from my experience, my wife and I experience, is that Florida has a problem today with that quality of that healthcare system, and it is significant depending on who you talk to. I'm a leader in a number of clubs and groups and national organizations that have an opportunity to talk to countless people about that issue. And in the healthcare system, what we're looking for is stability, long-term relationships, trust, and access to doctors and specialists, what you need, when you need it. And if that's not there, that is a negative on the quality of the system. I had an opportunity to listen to all the witnesses at the first hearing on this bill, so I get a little better sense. And I understand that, but so what's the effect of that? We have a problem today. We have a problem today. I live on a block with 12 homes, 11 different states represented. One home is vacant. And you can talk about pickleball and golf for a couple of minutes, and then you talk about quality, talking about health care. The results of the current system and the deficiencies in those key characteristics that I mentioned. We have 2 neighbors that travel to their home state for their health care. They're full-time residents of Florida. And that's why, because they can't get here what they need in healthcare. And I know there's a lot of quality physicians and providers, but I believe, and in speaking in opposition and respectfully urge you to vote no on the bill as it's written and presented today, that this bill will increase kind of and accelerate, exacerbate the problems that Floridians are experiencing today in the healthcare system on the availability and the cost of health care. And I thank you for the time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, sir. Alfred Granovius, and then Beth Young is on deck.
Good morning. My name is Al Granovius, and I'm an insurance broker for Marsh McLennan. I've been in the insurance industry for 35 years, specializing in the placement of medical malpractice insurance for both hospitals and physicians for the past 15 years. Since 2019.
Now, if you'll notice, now we're getting, just like the guy before, they send him in like he's a citizen. Guarantee you, Bob Johnson's got some kind of a special interest. Just like this, of course, this guy's a little bit more obvious here. He's letting you know. They dress nice, look great, and they're all to throw the bill down because one guy's afraid his medical insurance might be higher. And this guy here, he's worried about medical insurance higher, period. It's ridiculous. But if the shoe's on the other foot, they wouldn't be here voting no.
You know, since 2017, we've had claims in excess of $5 million have nearly tripled. Claims in excess of $20 million have increased by over 400%. In 2023 alone, Florida had 8 medical malpractice claims in excess of $20 million. And in 2017, for the entire country, there was only 1 medical malpractice claim in excess of $47 million. Fast forward to 2023, there are 13. Florida had 1 of those for $211 million.
By the way, just want to remind you, Florida is the only state in the United States that has this law. The only state. There are a couple of other states that are similar, but no one denies the right to families to recover after they have had a medical malpractice.
Challenging medical malpractice insurance market, that much worse, driving premiums and deductibles even higher. And with Florida's 25% of the population being 65 and older, I mean, that'll be absolutely dire. And I know one of
And I do want to say, too, you want to drive down the cost of medical malpractice, stop the malpractice. Maybe the problem is doctors are overworked. Maybe they're doing too long of hours. Maybe their hospitals that they're working in are really demanding too much of them. They need more doctors in to where they can share that time. Maybe what these doctors need is more oversight and regulation of one another. There's other ways to bring these costs down and not sit here and just do malpractice and it's like no big deal.
Hello, I'm Beth Young. I come here today to share my thoughts on the statute 768.21 subsection 8 and what kind of impact it has been on our family since my mother passed in 2023. We have been sad, angry, frustrated, lost relationships through some family members, stress and no closure on why this happened and how to move on with our lives knowing there was nothing we could have done to fix the situations we are in. My mom was a 66-year-old Tallahassee resident, being an RN nurse for many years, that did home health care. She was supposed to go for an overnight stay to do the Watchman procedure to hopefully become healthier, and instead at TMH, Tallahassee Memorial Hospital, had some untrained nurses on what signs to look out for when risks start to be visible to the staff. My mom went into a natural coma, and the hospital gave us 14 days to decide on what to do with my mom, either to take her to another city or state for rehab or let her pass naturally from her brain aneurysm that was caused. Look around in this room and see the faces that will be coming up here, that what they've been through so much, and I am asking politely to make a clean repeal with no caps, as there is no evidence that doctors will leave Florida. That's just opinions or what you guys hear. My mom's appointment was at 11:30 a.m. They didn't come to get her until 6 p.m. that night. She had diabetes and she had medicine that was helping her. She couldn't take any of those. So she couldn't drink water, she couldn't eat something, and the fact that she wasn't able to be seen until 6 p.m., that's unacceptable. I would have rather them came up to us and said, you know what, I have too many people in front of you, let's just go ahead and reschedule. That way she could have still had what she needed. But just to continue to get all these patients in one day, just to get it done, I'm a CNA. I take my job seriously. That's somebody's life. I care about people's lives. And thank you, Senator Yarbrough, for making this bill.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Judy Davis. And Andrew
Judy
Baldwin.
Davis, thank you so much. It was really nice to, our Judy Davis lady coming up now, but the lady that just came up, Beth Young. It shows that people living from another state, and Florida has massive numbers of visitors, would not be able to recover. Your state may allow it, but not Florida.
But I know that healthcare providers throughout the system, their first concern is patient safety, and they do not want harm to come to a patient. There are bad, unfortunate outcomes that do occur, but there's not always negligence involved in those cases. I've found only about 25% involve some degree of negligence in the cases that I handle and I do handle all the legal cases for our hospital. Medical malpractice does impact the healthcare systems overall in Florida. Our state is already facing a growing shortage of physicians and nurses in the state, and our population is growing daily. When physicians and hospitals have to pay large sums of money for damages, it does result in higher insurance premiums for both the hospital and doctors. In fact, in 2013, our facility premium was $3.6 million. For the last 5 years, our facility has seen a 40% increase in malpractice coverage, but that doesn't account for the $4 million self-insurance retention or the deductible that we have to maintain on each case. That means the hospital must pay the first $4 million on each and every case that occurs in our facility.
If you'll notice, all these rise in malpractice premiums aren't from the very type cases that we're talking about. Their insurance is going up because of malpractice. Maybe somebody ought to think about how to stop the malpractice. I get the point that she says. Not every case is due to negligence. I get that. And I understand that. In our case, we're dealing with homicide to top it off. Not just malpractice, but not just Dr. Schultz, but Dr. Andrews, 40-year veteran pathologist that reviewed the case, found it also to be homicide and demanded a federal investigation.
Recruit new physicians. At my hospital, we are continuously recruiting. We talk to physicians daily, and it takes at least 2 years to fill one vacancy with our physicians. Physicians say they don't want to come to Florida because they're concerned for malpractice rates. Young doctors feel they can't really enter a specialized practice due to the rates, and they feel that due to Florida being such a litigious state, it's not a good option for them.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. I have to ask you to.
Thank you.
All right,
I would encourage not passing this bill as written, but maybe consider some capping on non-economic damages.
Thank you, ma'am. Andrew Bolin, and then Karen Murillo is on deck.
Good morning. My name is Andy Bolin, and I am here on behalf of the Florida Justice Reform Institute. I'm a board-certified civil trial lawyer. I represent doctors and hospitals, other healthcare providers all across the state. And my clients are currently facing the highest medical malpractice premiums in the United States. There was a question about where that information comes from. You can look at the Medical Malpractice Liability Monitor. They publish annually a survey.
Now he's going to say where the information comes from. I know that Ethan did a lot of research. I don't know if he's going to talk about it today because there's so limited time, but he challenges the facts that they're stating and says that they're incorrect. So this lawyer, if Ethan tackles this, I don't know if he will, but if he tackles it, he might get a little bit embarrassed when a 21-year-old corrects their stats.
Which mean there are counties in Florida where there is no physician, no hospital, or no birthing center that offers obstetrical care. Infusing hundreds of new cases into the system without any reciprocal protections for the physicians and the hospitals is only going to exacerbate that problem. And remember that every single physician case that takes place in a hospital in Florida, even if the physician is not employed by the hospital, traditionally tort law says if it's a non-employee, then you're not responsible for their care. But in Florida, there are causes of action for what's called a parent agency, which brings in hospitals even when they don't employ the physicians who are alleged to have committed malpractice. So I'm here today to speak in opposition of the bill. Last year, there was a coalition of healthcare providers who were willing to support this bill to go forward with the reciprocal protection of caps. So I'd encourage the committee to please consider that option as well. Thank you very much.
Karen Murillo, and then Sabrina Davis is on deck.
Mr. Chair, thank you. AARP is here. We proudly stand in support of Senate Bill 734, and we thank you, Senator Yarborough, for bringing this good bill and for your dedication and commitment to this issue. We stand behind this bill because existing state law that this seeks to repeal is discriminatory. It discriminates against older and vulnerable adults. It carves out a second class of citizens when it comes to wrongful death. It prevents Florida families from seeking justice. Plain and simple, this is a wrong law that should not be on the books and should be removed. When we hear all of these other issues about medical malpractice premiums, cost of health care, we shouldn't be looking at how to solve the cost of health care by continuing to keep a discriminatory law on state books. We shouldn't continue something that is clearly depriving families of justice and access to the courts and accountability. You know, we hear about the medical malpractice premiums, and there's a lot of concerns and arguments raised about those skyrocketing and how litigation is going to go up if this bill passes. While we've seen legislation since the 70s here in Florida designed to decrease the cost of health care and protect the medical malpractice insurers, but that has not been passed on to the taxpayers. That has not been passed on to the doctors. That has not been passed on to reducing the cost of health care in Florida. It has only served to insulate the insurers. And again, continuing to allow a discriminatory law to stay in effect just to allow the medical malpractice insurers to keep high premiums or to justify other premiums is wrong.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sabrina Davis. And then Marcy Shepler, you're on deck.
Thank you, Senator Yarborough, for bringing this bill, and Senator Rodriguez for previously bringing ones before this that were similar. My dad is a Navy veteran who died of medical malpractice, and I am that person that the Department of Health found that the hospital worked below the standard of care and committed medical malpractice in my dad's death. After this happened, the hospital offered to reimburse me for the autopsy if I stopped sharing my dad's story. Clearly, they have money to spend, so I don't think that, you know.
Listen closely. She's got a very passionate story, very vocal, and very much in the forefront.
Another thing I wanted to talk about is if the Department of Health holds people accountable, then I don't see the concern of why we have this controversial topic of ending this law. If they're doing this job, I am one of 8 people here today that have had a founding, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but it's very hard to prove these cases. So when you hear people say that their numbers are going to be outrageous, I can't find that factual. I can't find facts anywhere. The truth is that no new medical malpractice cases would be presented if this law changes. It would only be revealing ones that are already there and maybe not being seen or recognized. My dad, traveled the depths of the ocean on a ballistic missile nuclear submarine for this country and made it home alive. And when he went to a hospital for knee pain, he came out dead. And you cannot compare a small stack of medical malpractice premium rates that is actually optional here in our state of Florida to the price that my dad paid for the freedom of our country. So I'm here today to ask you to vote yes on this law and restore our rights. And when it comes to human life, accountability is non-negotiable. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Marcy Shepler, and Ethan Lopez is next.
Ethan's coming up after Marcy.
Thank you, Senator Yarborough, for bringing SB 734 and for legislators for allowing me to speak today. I am Marcy Shepler, and I am JoJo's mom. On September 6, 2019, I brought my son JoJo for medical care at a hospital in Port St. Lucie. He was nonverbal. He had Down syndrome. He had autism and the cognitive abilities of a 2-year-old. And despite being in obvious distress, the hospital refused to treat him. By the time I rushed him to another hospital, he was in septic shock, and my JoJo died at the age of 29. A CMS investigation confirmed that the hospital had violated EMTALA laws and placed JoJo in imminent jeopardy, which is their highest sanction. Yet despite this clear negligence, Florida's laws left me powerless to seek justice for my son. Florida's wrongful death statute is fundamentally broken. It states if a victim is over 24, unmarried, and has no minor children, that their life has no value in the eyes of the law. But JoJo was never an independent adult. I was his plenary guardian. A Florida judge had ruled him to be cognitively incompetent to marry or father children, meaning he was legally and functionally a dependent child. And when it came to holding those responsible for his death, I was told I did not qualify enough as a mother to seek justice. The same as JoJo's father, who had not seen him in 25 years, would not be able to bring a lawsuit because absenteeism and abandonment of a child can occur within 60 days in Florida. But let me be clear, this law does not just fail parents like me, it actively endangers people like JoJo. It allows hospitals to ignore, neglect, and discriminate against vulnerable adults with disabilities without fear of consequence. Yet if I had failed to get JoJo medical care that night, I could have been charged with neglect. But when the system failed him, there was no accountability. And I am a nurse now, and I believe in health care. And by supporting SB 734, we're trying to correct a disparity in justice because there's no amount of money that can replace JoJo. But the undeniable truth is that when hospitals are forced to pay money, they pay attention and they make healthcare safer. Throughout JoJo's life, I made every decision for him. I fought for his education, his healthcare, his dignity, and in his final moments, I made the final decision, and the most painful one of all, was to let him go and to hold his hand and listen for his final breath and watch the light go out from his eyes. That was my last act as his mother. I am asking you to act, to repeal Florida's wrongful death statute and end this blatant, shameful discrimination against people with severe developmental disabilities and make sure no other parent is stripped of their right to fight for their child. Jesus said, as you did it unto me, as you did unto the least of my brothers, you did unto me. Please make sure that Florida's health care is safer for the JoJos. Vote in favor of SB 734.
Amen, Marcy. God bless her heart. And my wife met her and Ethan as well. Here's Ethan now speaking.
And then Jana Sutoova is
And then Jana will be next.
Chairman, members of this committee, I speak in support of SB 734 to repeal Florida's free kill law. When I spoke in the Judiciary Committee earlier this month, I expressed the view that subsection 8 of Florida Statute 768.21 is a dangerous provision in the law that shields criminal actions in the medical field. In December of 2021, 2 licensed Florida physicians that my grandfather, Stefan Suto, was familiar with, not only offered but requested that he be brought to their outpatient care in Gulf Breeze, Florida, for flu-like symptoms that he was experiencing at the time. In short, these 2 physicians proceeded to inject my grandfather with 21 milliliters of IV hydrogen peroxide and administered direct ozone gas into his veins numerous times, and then additionally performed an out-of-hospital, non-cross-match blood transfusion in a hotel room. They did all of this while lying to and defrauding my grandfather and the rest of the family in every step and aspect of his care. After his death, these physicians proceeded to falsify his medical records by omitting what they gave him. My family would hire private forensic pathologist Dr. Daniel Schultz, who conducted an autopsy on my grandfather and concluded that his death was caused directly by the actions of the physicians I mentioned to you, labeling his death a homicide. A common thing I hear when I share my grandfather's story to so many people is that it sounds criminal. However, dare I say, the doctors who did this to my grandfather are being protected. Our entire family has felt that nothing has been properly looked into or taken seriously by state officials at all levels, even with the autopsy reports by Dr. Schultz on our side. This is the reason one of the very first things my mother, who's sitting right there, wanted to do was file a lawsuit. I mentioned that since the idea of grandchildren filing lawsuits was brought up here. We feel that the local state's attorney's office, medical examiner's office, and police department in where my grandfather died are all failing to respond to a serious crime, with public records even revealing investigators from these offices wishing to be as quiet as possible about my grandfather's case and even mocking our family's attempts to get justice. I mentioned in my previous speech that there are cases where law enforcement can be uncertain as to how to go about responding to criminality in the medical field. For the sake of time, I'll briefly cite the case of a physician named Dr. Ben Brown. But in my grandfather's case, they didn't even bother to try figuring it out in the first place. All of what I'm saying matters because civil lawsuits have the potential to reveal criminal wrongdoing. There's a discovery process, and Florida's free kill law denies so many families and patients of that and the rest of the civil process, our country's other form of justice other than just our criminal justice system. And even now, with all of the evidence that we have, we get the exact same answers from every attorney we speak to. Sorry, look up Florida 768.21 subsection 8. Doctors did this to your grandfather? Sorry, can't sue. So the point here, my family is being left with absolutely no justice in the state of Florida, not even civil, all due to this inhumane and barbaric free kill law. And
Must be done.
Oh,
Finish.
and this would not happen in all 49 other states of this country. I sincerely ask that you don't allow insurance companies and greed to decide what's right or wrong. All of you are elected by your constituents, and if an injustice happens to any of your constituents, please let them know that you support them getting their day in court. Let's let a judge and a jury decide what's right or wrong here. Repeal Florida's free kill law and vote yes on SB 734. Thank you.
Thank you. Jana Sutoova.
Ethan did amazing. Amazing.
Kornienko is next.
Well, hello, members of this committee. My name is Jana Sutoova, and I am a daughter of Stefan Suto. You just heard from my son, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to repeat everything he said, how my daddy died. But I came here to support the bill 734. I'm asking you to support it. And I also came here to tell you that we are not only here for us and our families and our dead loved ones that died in such horrible way. We are here for you and your families. And we are here for the lobbyists here who are on behalf of insurance companies and hospitals, because they're going to tell you that money has value until this happens to them, until it is their 25-year-old daughter or until it is their mother that was killed by negligence. So please consider love is beyond the grave, and we are here for that love. Okay, and I'm asking you, please vote yes for 734 bill.
Thank you very much. Lauren Kornienko, you're recognized, and then Darcy McGill is next.
Good morning, Chair Trumbull and members of the committee. My name is Lauren Kornienko. In August 2023, my active 70-year-old mother was found dead in her hospital bed, covered in blood, days after an uncomplicated surgery. Upon arrival at the hospital, we were told to leave our mother's room immediately. County investigators were on their way and were considering our mother's room a possible crime scene. The pathologist determined her death was preventable. She died because her doctor and staff ignored at least 10 signs of a surgical site infection. Left untreated, it progressed to septic shock, which then caused a gastrointestinal hemorrhage. She slowly bled to death over 24 hours in a room with broken monitoring equipment. When we sought legal help, we were stunned to learn that Florida law denies our family access to the Florida judicial system. The law discriminates against victims and their families based purely on marital and family status, and it denies them equal protection under the law. People like my sister, who is 40 years old, unmarried, and without children, are also left without protection. The law targets the most vulnerable members of our society, the special needs community, the widowed, the elderly, and those without family. This is wrong. The law enables waste and abuse of taxpayer money. Medicare's investigation found that the doctor failed to appropriately evaluate our mother's condition, and yet it could not refuse payment without a malpractice judgment, something that our family cannot possibly obtain because of this statute. This leaves taxpayers paying for negligent care that causes death. The current statute creates a two-tiered system of justice, allowing negligent healthcare providers to escape accountability for the deaths of certain people, essentially making Florida a sanctuary for medical malpractice. This makes healthcare in Florida less safe for all of us. In previous committees, I've heard several lobbyists refer to the caps on medical malpractice damages that they want added to this bill. They describe them as guardrails. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines a guardrail as a protective barrier. Ethical societies do not erect barriers to justice. They dismantle them.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you very much.
Please vote yes.
Darcy McGill, and then Alyssa Jaron is next.
Good morning, Chair Trumbull and members of the committee. My name is Darcy McGill. On August 4th, 2023, I was woken up at 4 a.m. by a call from my sister. Wake up, it's Mom. My mother was my best friend, and she died alone in a horrific manner so unfathomable. I believe God made sure I wasn't there because he knew I would never recover from seeing her last minutes. This is when I learned about Florida's dirty little secret. I understand that some may take issue with the term free kill, but the reality of it is that this group of individuals is just that, a free pass when negligence leads to preventable death. I am not only here as a family of a victim, I am here as a Floridian who falls under the category of those who are discriminated by the current law. I have yet to hear one good reason why my life is less valuable because I am unmarried and without children. At a previous hearing, a lobbyist said his clients need reciprocal protections added to this bill, but that's what medical malpractice insurance is for, to protect them. The people that need protections are the victims and the families denied justice by the free kill law, people like my mother and I. It's deplorable that the compromise the opposition wants to see is a bill that would restore rights to myself and others like me only if there is a limit to how much they can be held accountable for. There should be no cap on the accountability when it comes to valuing human life. Caps are the equivalent of putting a Band-Aid over a wound rather than addressing the problem at hand. The opposition continuously states that you can't put a price on life, which is true, yet this is exactly what they are doing by requesting these caps placed in the bill. There is only one clear and just conclusion regarding the issue of caps, and that's what we're requesting from you. Let the attorneys do their job and determine if they can prove medical negligence in a court. If a jury decides medical negligence is found, the recovery should be determined through a judge's decision based on the specifics of each case. Hospital systems and insurance companies have had 35 years to address the problems that would arise when equal rights are restored to people like me, yet they still claim when restoring these equal rights and equal protections, it would cause them undue hardships. How much more time should be given to figure this out? Time is of the essence. Every year this law stands, there are families added to a group that none of us wanted to be a part of. Without urgency to drive change, complacency persists. Here the stakes are incredibly high. Failure to act comes at the cost of human life. This hospital dismissed my family's concern about my mother's condition before she died, and they dismissed our questions after her death. After finding out about this law, I was shocked to know the state of Florida has dismissed people like myself. My mother may not be here to speak out about this abominable law, but I am. Senators, I urge you to vote in favor of this bill and bring an end to 35 years of injustice. You have the ability to give people like me our constitutional rights back, and I respectfully request that your vote request this today.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Alyssa Jaron, and then Michael Tompkins is next.
It's amazing what we're hearing today, and I'm going to get into later what Russia's laws are.
Today, Bill, it means a lot to me because my father meant everything to me. My dad was my best friend. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. It's the Equal Protection Clause in our 14th Amendment in the United States Constitution. Right now, Florida has created a law, and this law does not create parity. Why are people who are 25 and up not protected? It's discriminatory. This is prejudice. That's why we have our Constitution. That's why we have our laws, to protect everybody, not just the some and the few. And you hear a lot of cases about these terrible things that have happened to people and how, well, doctors can go to, they can get in trouble for it, go to the DOH and go to ACA. What about in these communities where you have this intentional negligence, though? Like communities like Liberty City, like where my father is from. Nobody cares about them there. And do you think that they have the access or resources or anything to be here today and speak up for themselves and for the people they've lost? Because they don't. And do you think that anyone would look at them twice or even process what they had to say? That it wouldn't happen. You would never see people from these communities.
One thing we're doing as well is I'm trying to take some screenshots here as we do this interview of the different people speaking. In the event that we cover this a little bit later in the broadcast, talking about the different individuals here. So When you see that pop up on your screen, that's what we're doing, is getting screenshots of the different speakers here. We may be interviewing some of these people as well in the near future.
There are facilities in these low-income neighborhoods, these minority neighborhoods, and it puts there's a target on them. North Shore Medical Center is called the death hospital. They say, go in with a headache, come out on life support. People are scared to seek emergency care. Nobody should be scared to go to the hospital.
She brought that up a couple of weeks ago. That really shocked me.
It's not right. Something should be done.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, I got to keep moving. Can you just finish up, please, real quick?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Most cases aren't heard from people. They deserve to be heard, and they can't afford for them to be heard. This law makes it really difficult for people to do what they deserve to do who can't afford to get here and tell you what happened to them. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Tompkins, and then David Micah, Jr. on deck.
Hi, I'm Michael Tompkins. I'm a third-year psychiatry resident physician serving right here in Tallahassee. I'm representing the Florida Medical Association, the Florida Osteopathic Association. I was asked to testify, happily doing so, to give my perspective on the passing of this bill and what it would mean for me, that is someone who's considering staying here in Florida. I'm originally from out west. Actually, before I continue, I wanted to really quickly say I hope that my comments are in no way appearing to diminish or dismiss the suffering of those who testified before me. And a lot of that was very tragic to hear, and I'm sorry to hear it. But to quickly talk about myself, I'm originally from out west. There are a lot of residency programs that you all in this state are doing a great job of opening, psychiatry being one of them right here in Tallahassee. Finishing up med school a few years ago, my wife and I were considering where we wanted to go for my career, and she's a working mom. She has a career too, and we also have a teenage son who's still studying. We looked at a lot of places and decided on Florida. We really like Tallahassee. My son loves it here, and we plan on staying here. There are a few things that I've learned, though, during residency that have made me consider broadening my horizons instead of signing a contract right now. So a few of those being the no cap. So I learned about this a little while back in talking with colleagues and friends. I have former classmates that are serving in residencies all over the nation, California and Texas being some of those places, and we've compared some things, and we're paying about double of malpractice insurance of what they pay counterparts in Texas. I think that's a little disparaging for someone
if you think about it. Notice, and this is what I find interesting, those that are against the bill, like in his case here, he didn't wear his medical coat like we saw 2 weeks ago a lot of doctors doing. This time he wears his ID with a big giant red MD listed under it. I guess they're trying to make sure they make their point.
No cap, that would be something that I actually think about. To really give a really quick example, and this is a hypothetical, but it's something that we talk about often in psychiatry. I know a lot of the examples I've heard are more surgical in nature. But I'm working right here at the HCA Florida Capitol here, right off of Capitol Circle. We have a lot of people coming into our ER. I worked in the ER for the last couple of years, and yeah, I'm almost done here. I think this is a pertinent hypothetical. That's why I figured I'd divulge. We got people that come in that are claiming to have suicidal thoughts, that are really just looking for a bed and meals. And a lot of times when they say they have suicidal thoughts, they'll say things like they plan on jumping into traffic. And we often think, well, what would be the worst case scenario if this poor person that was just coming in to try to get a meal, and we've decided that they were not a danger, they did not need to be admitted, they would have crossed the street and, heaven forbid, be hit by a car, and we would be liable for something like that. So to close, what I'm trying to say is, I know there was arguments about physicians maybe leaving the state. I'm not sure about that, not being an established physician here. But I will say that upcoming prospective physicians that are looking to serve here, this is definitely something that we're looking at. It's something that's keeping me from being able to sign a contract, which I'm already being offered by some places here in town. And one last thing that I promise, and I'll go, is we have an aging physician population. I can name 8 psychiatry supervisors I'm working with right now. 6 of them are over 60, and a couple of them have told me we've talked about this. We meet often, and they say things like, well, they love practicing, but...
Sir, I got to cut you off.
Okay, yeah. They love practicing, but they were more likely to retire due to stuff like this. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much. David Micah. Megan Sal, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. David Mike on behalf of the Florida Hospital Association. I'll try and be quick, sir. I know a lot of my points have been made already today, but I want to talk about our system. I want to talk about what you're seeing in your ability to retain quality care here in Florida. You're seeing the highest rates in the country in Miami-Dade County in 4 categories: family practice, emergency room physicians, orthopedists, and we've talked about obstetricians. There's a hospital in South Florida I was talking to this morning. They went and did their reinsurance claims. Their rates went up 76% year over year, 101% over 3 years. For the first time in their history, they're having to go a less than A-rated insurance company to carry the levels of care that they need to. I asked the obvious follow-up that many of you are looking at me asking right now. Well, do you guys provide quality care? Are you guys a relatively good hospital? Yeah, we're a top 100 hospital in the country. That's not how this system should work. And when we talk about adding caps in, this is not a financial conversation we're having because we want to retain something. Nonprofit hospitals have to stay open. 1/3 of your rural hospitals in this state are operating at a negative margin. Where do they find the extra $4 million to pay the first dollars for their claims? We are talking about receiving care in the areas where we need it. This is a serious claim. The things we've heard are serious here today. I understand that. But nowhere in the current law is access to the courts denied to these people. In a limited circumstance, we are talking about non-economic damages here. And we ask that you entertain that, as the senator has and been very willing to do in the past too, on caps as well, that we look at that for the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Megan Sal, and then Karen Aguilar is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Megan Soul. I'm a medical malpractice attorney practicing in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm a 7th-generation Floridian. I, too, want to get to the core of this bill, and that is to right a wrong. You're not expanding medical malpractice. You are fixing something that is unjust. The opportunity to right this exception, a law that has deemed some Floridians don't matter as much and have less value than others. Sisters, brothers, grandparents, parents, pillars of our families that make up this state don't have as much value in the eyes of this bill or the eyes of this law as some others do. You have one sister who's 30, the other who's 28. The 28-year-old has a family of 2 and a husband. One sister who's unmarried is not as valued in the eyes of the law. And I want to address something that was brought up earlier by Senator Harrell, and that's an estranged child or parent coming in and wanting to file a claim for medical malpractice. That potential thing happening should not invalidate people being able to pursue these claims as a whole. People who are seeking justice for their children, people who are seeking justice for their parents. In closing, I just want to say caps and how this law is currently written negatively affects some of the most vulnerable of our people group. The scales of justice are held by a woman who's blindfolded. Justice is blind. It doesn't ask if you have grown children. It doesn't ask if you're married. Justice can only be applied in a fair way if the law is fair, and I am in favor of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Karen Aguilar.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, ma'am.
God, for a good attorney to stand up. That's the first one I've seen so far.
Yes, I do. I was going to save this for debate, but you opened up the door about children who are estranged making a claim. I think Senator Harrell asked that question. In that instance, would you expect the process, the system of laws that we have for calculating damages, loss of consortium, alienation of affection, that in that instance the defense lawyers would do their job and someone who only deserves $500,000 and asking for $5 million would get justice?
You're recognized, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. I would believe that the process would work its way out. That's why we have juries. Juries evaluate the evidence. They're presented with what's in front of someone, how much someone was really, in non-economic damages term, receiving from a family member. So I believe that evidence would be presented on both sides, both plaintiff and defense, and then a jury would be able to make a fully informed decision based off the evidence that's presented at trial.
Thank you very much. Karen Aguilar, and then Daryl Parrott is, I didn't get that right, but Daryl, you're next. You're recognized.
Hi, good morning. I'd like to thank everyone for their time today, and a special thank you to Senator Yarborough for bringing this bill. It means a lot. My name is Karen Aguilar, and I'm here in honor of my father, Steve Aguilar. He was 87, and he passed away on January 4th, 2025, due to a spiral of medical negligence that occurred over 5 days in a Pasco County hospital. On December 31st of 2024, I would never have imagined that I would take my father to the ER for minor back pain, and then 4 days later, I would be holding his hand as I hear his last heartbeat and watch him take his last breath. When we speak of true pain and suffering, I lived that for the 5 days that I watched play by play my father pass away from acts of medical professionals and substandard care. The medical professionals should know the patient and not rush to just give medication. My father was given Seroquel, a very strong antipsychotic drug, which is known to be dangerous to patients that are elderly and have AFib and then any type of dementia. Further, to know that they had a machine known as CRRT that could have saved his life in that hospital, yet hours would pass and then we would be told that they would have to transfer him to another hospital because the medical professionals didn't feel comfortable running that machine. It's simply unfathomable and should never happen. It would then take 6+ hours for a transfer to a new hospital. A complete delay of critical care is not acceptable. We deserve better than this. My father deserved better than that. Some argue that financial compensation cannot replace a loved one, and you're correct. But wrongful death lawsuits are not about putting a price on a life. They are about ensuring accountability, deterring negligence, and giving families a pathway to justice. Some argue that the only way to fight back actors in the healthcare is through consequences. But yet, the system is not designed as such to make it an easy process or a fair outcome. Much of the investigation is done behind closed doors, and you have no real face-to-face or voice in the matter, which is simply dehumanizing. Proving medical negligence claims through the Florida Department of Health is very challenging, as you've heard, with success rates being maybe between 20 to 30%.
Ma'am, can you bring it in for a close, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Because families are blocked from pursuing the medical malpractice claims via due process, keep in mind that the financial burden shifts to victims and all Floridians as unpaid medical malpractice claims drive up insurance premiums. You can compare this to basically claims in auto insurance. We are pleading for you to do the right thing today and restore justice under our 14th Amendment rights for we the people that you took an oath to serve and protect. Please repeal this law and vote yes to Senate Bill 734. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Daryl Parrott, and I'm going to have to, unfortunately, cut everybody off at 2 minutes, so forgive me for that. But Daryl, you're recognized.
Why is my 33-year-old son, Cameron Cowan Parrott, dead? That is a terrible question. No father should ever have to ask anyone at any time. Because of that law, I cannot get an answer to that question. This is not about money. I have all I will ever need. This is about responsibility, accountability, and the truth. On Monday evening, November 18th, I rushed Cameron to Flagler Hospital, emergency room, St. Augustine. He was in severe pain, coughing up blood. He informed them of a history of blood clots, put his finger on his abdomen where the pain was emanating from. After the pain eased, we were sent home with no answers. We went back at 6 a.m. The following morning, the same issue, worse symptoms. Over the next 3 days, Cameron's condition continued to worsen. We kept telling each new doctor and nurse about his history of blood clots. Finally, after 3 days, doctors informed us they would be performing surgery. They quickly discovered that he had a blood clot in the very same place he had pointed to days earlier. By that time, it was too late. The blood clot had cut the blood supply off his internal organs for too long. I spent the next 12 hours holding his hand and watching my son slowly die. That was nearly 4 days after we walked into the emergency room with him screaming in pain. When his mother asked the surgeon why they waited so long to perform surgery or investigate the blood clots, he simply said, "I don't know, ma'am. They called me at 2 p.m. today."
Mr. Parrott, I'm sorry, I got to cut you off. It's been 2 minutes. But I got to cut you off. We got to move on to the next speaker. I apologize.
I'm sorry. I woke up with a bad...
I said I got to cut you off. We got to move on to the next speaker, sir.
You want me to cut it and stop?
No, I got to ask you to step down and allow the next person to speak because of our time constraint.
Can't finish?
No, sir. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry for your loss and appreciate your time here. Next, we have Adam Basford. And then after that is Jim Callinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adam Basford with Associated Industries. I'll be very brief and kind of keep this at a very high level. You know, we at AIF represent businesses from all sectors of the community, from people that provide health care, people that insure it, to employers who pay health care costs, and the employees that need those services. And so at the forefront of all our minds is very holistic in nature, and it's the quality, availability, and cost of health care for all Floridians. So in the context of this discussion, we really encourage you to approach this in a more holistic way. We believe this bill before you does tackle the issue of helping those who have been harmed by tragic events, but doesn't address the real need to make sure that Florida providers are able to continue to provide quality health care at an affordable and accessible cost for all Floridians. As it moves forward, we really hope that we can have these conversations about how we can make this more holistic approach and work with Chair Yarborough to, like you said, mitigate some of the liability impacts here. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, sir. Jim Callinger, and then up on deck is Tom Wheeler. No, Jim Callinger is speaking against Tom Wheeler. Speaking against Carolyn Johnson. And on deck is Taylor Hill.
Mr. Chair.
You're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Carolyn Johnson on behalf of the Florida Chamber of Commerce. And we have concerns with this bill as it is currently written. And our concerns center around the fact that the bill...
Real quick, while they're sitting here, these are all the naysayers coming up. I looked up just to see if Russia... What was it in Russia compared to the U.S. here? On Florida's free kill law versus Russia's approach, who can sue for wrongful death? Only spouse and minor children in Florida, any family member or legal representative in Russia. Criminal penalties for doctors in Florida? Rarely. Russia, possible prison time and license revocation. Can adult children sue for parents' death in Florida? No. In Russia? Yes. Can parents sue for adult child's death? In Florida? No. Russia? Yes. Are hospitals held accountable? In Florida? Limited. In Russia? Yes, including state-run hospitals. Compensation for pain and suffering? In Florida? No. In Russia? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Tom Wheeler, and I'm the owner of Custom Detailing here in Tallahassee. I'm also a member of the Small Business and Consumers Alliance. For those of us that own a small business like mine, the cost of every kind of insurance has gone through the roof over the last couple of years. I would never be one to tell someone with a legitimate injury that they should not pursue legal action, but on the other hand, I'm deeply opposed to using the courts to bully a small business and their insurance company into a settlement. And while driving one of my company vehicles, they had my company's logo on it. And when I say it was a slight accident, it's very slight, no injuries, thank goodness. But that incident led to legal action against me and my insurance company that was nothing more than a settlement, that was more than an attempt to get a major settlement. So you can imagine the interest I would have in legal reform. As a small business, what concerns me about Senate Bill 734 is that if we make it easier to sue healthcare facilities and medical staff for pain and suffering, we may be opening a Pandora's box for this kind of abuse that could drive up rates and make it impossible for me or my wife to afford to have affordable auto and health insurance for our business.
Mr. Wheeler, I got to ask you to.
Thank you. I urge you to vote against this bill. Thank you.
Taylor Hill, you're recognized. And then Carter Scott is on deck.
Good morning. My name is Taylor Hill. I'm a plaintiff's attorney from Miami, Florida, and I'm here proudly in support of this bill. If anyone in this room feels like they have deja vu, it's because for over 35 years, we've been having this debate. Physicians fleeing the state and premiums rising, and us Floridians being told, if you give away your rights slowly but surely, this problem will get better. Physicians will stay, healthcare will get more affordable. And for 35 years, in exchange for our rights, premiums have gotten higher, and we are now the 8th worst state for healthcare in the nation. It is not the physicians' fault. They are part of a system that is failing them as well. But to constantly blame Floridians and place obstacles in their rights and access to their courts is also not solving this problem. I ask this room to think about what promise Floridians have been actually delivered upon in exchange for these laws, because the promise was better physicians, better health care, more affordability. For 35 years, that's been the promise. And has that been delivered? The answer is no. Then this law should be repealed.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Carter Scott, and then on deck is Cindy Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. I'd first like to thank all of these victims who have been so courageous to get up in front of you all today and share their intimate stories with you. Their courage, their stories are the very reason this bill is so important in Florida. There are families that are being denied justice every day who've gone through unthinkable loss without any recourse. And so I join them in supporting this bill. But I want to address some of the issues that have been raised by the opponents, specifically issues related to healthcare costs and premiums. Okay, if you peel back the onion and you actually look at states all over the...
I'm super sorry. We don't have time for all of that. But I appreciate your stance on the bill. Moving on, Cindy Jenkins. And then Dr. Mahaffey is next. And I do think it's important, everybody, to remember this committee ends at 11:30, so I've got just a little bit of time. Cindy, you're recognized.
I've been the 100% single mom of my 2 daughters most of their lives. My 2 girls are my entire world. They're both halves of my heart. 2 years ago today, my daughter Taylor was 25 years for 2.5 months when she was killed in a Florida hospital. A private autopsy prompted the medical examiner to change the cause of death. The cause sent by the hospital did not exist. I have an affidavit outlining the reckless negligence. The Florida Department of Health and Agency for Healthcare Administration are greatly failing all of us. For the last 2 years, I've listened to hospitals, doctors, insurance companies, and lobbyists preach of the unintended consequences of this law being repealed. I argue that my daughter, their loved ones, and so many others are the unintended consequence of this law. I urge you to please support this bill, allow this milestone moment of returning our rights under the United States Constitution to be the exact pressure needed for the interest to rush straight down to the Department of Health and Agency for Healthcare Administration and work tirelessly alongside them to ensure we have the safest healthcare in the nation. Imagine what this will do for medical malpractice premiums and what a privilege it will be for a doctor to practice here. We are not the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Mahaffey.
Mahaffey.
Yeah, thank you. Very quick, please.
Yeah, I know. Hi, my name is Dr. Teresa Mahaffey. I've been a physician in Florida for the last 29 years, spent all that time in the Pensacola area. I have never heard of this law until I met my friend Jana, and I am appalled. I am here as a physician in full support of SB 734 to repeal Florida's free kill law. In my own career, I've witnessed fellow physicians display carelessness and indifference to the well-being of their patients. I've had instances where they've berated parents, and I've had to sort out the issues with those children. Not long ago, a surgeon in the area where I practice removed the liver of a tourist during an operation intended to remove his spleen. So these egregious acts are what we're here for today. These types of physicians are stains in our profession. This is a matter of basic ethics. One thing I must mention, in my 30 years of practice, I have never heard of Florida's free kill law. I couldn't believe it was real when I first heard about it. Other physicians who I know had not heard about it at all. And I was wondering if this was taught in the FSU medical school curriculum here in Tallahassee, where I was an adjunct professor for 20 years.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you. I'm sorry. I've got a couple of folks that are going to waive their time. George Faju waiving against. Mark Delagal with Pro Assurance Corporation waiving against. Jason Wynn, the Florida Osteopathic Medical Association waiving against. And Sandra Mortham with the Doctors Company waiving against. Members, we're in debate. Senator Roussani, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I'll see this bill again in rules, but I want to honor the victims, the courageous family members that came forward today. This bill is about justice. It's about accountability. It's about the truth. Litigation does not have to increase. Physicians need only heed the signs, do a better job in practice, and avoid egregious errors. The milestone moment will be when this bill passes off the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Harrell, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be brief. But I think we really need to look at what the bill really wants to do and put accountability in our system. And we've heard that again and again. And my heart goes out to every single case we heard. I absolutely hear you. But if you really want to put accountability into this bill, into the system, the Board of Medicine, ACA, is where we need to do that. We have been trying to recruit people to Florida. We've spent $500 million
such
last year.
A horrible statement of hers. We know too well. Board of Medicine is going to side with the doctors in most cases. It is political even there.
An increase in medical malpractice. We are already the highest in the country, and it will continue. I am very concerned that when we talk about estranged children, the judge has the ability to preclude any mention of that and say it's not relevant if that's brought up. There's so many things wrong with this bill. If we were really to put accountability in it, empower the Board of Medicine. We have 3 strikes as you're out. Let's empower the Board of Medicine to really make sure we have the accountability. And I'm sorry, I just can't vote for this today. There are other ways to solve this problem without creating more problems in the system.
Senator Broder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We talk a lot about the uniqueness of Florida, and I want to address some of the economic arguments. One of the things that's unique to Florida is that we have the ability for physicians to post and go bare. You can just have a notice, say that you're not going to carry malpractice, and so that mitigates some of that economic burden. The other is that physicians can invoke arbitration. They don't have to go to a jury trial. That's unique to Florida, and so that mitigates some of your economic damages. And the last is that there's like half of all the other states have no caps on damages. They have hospitals. They are able to function. And so if they're able to do it, so should we. So the last question is, do we value life? And the answer is I do. So that's why I'll be up on the bill. Good job, Senator Yarborough.
Any other members in debate? Seeing none, Senator Yarborough, you recognize the close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senators, for your comments. Just in closing, Mr. Chair, I realize that all stakeholders who are engaged on the issue are not in agreement. I value the candid and respectful dialogue that we continue to have, and as well as the suggestions that have been brought up today. As I said in the opening, I remain open and willing to consider changes that some would like to make, though I believe we must pursue a solution that can secure support from both chambers and thus prevent the exceptions from remaining on our books for what would be 36 years if we don't do something this year. Again, the bill is about accountability, the value of life, and ensuring our laws are just. And with that, I ask for your favorable support.
Robin, would you please call the roll on Senate Bill 734?
Senator Berman? Senator Broder? Senator Burton? Senator Garcia? Senator Gruters? Senator Harrell? Senator Rodriguez? Senator Roussan? Senator Davis? Chair Trumbull.
Yes. Senators, by your vote, we will show Senate Bill 734 is reported favorably. Does any senator wish to be recorded as voting on bills before the committee today? Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to be recorded in the affirmative on tab 1. Thank you.
Senator Garcia.
I'd like to vote on the affirmative, also tab 1.
Senator Gruters. Okay. Without objection, we'll show those motions adopted. Seeing no other business before our committee, Senator Burton moves we adjourn. Seeing no objection, the motion's adopted. Thank you all.
Well, this is a wonderful day so far. It has passed another huge hurdle in getting this done. I'm so glad to see that. And now I guess the next step, I don't know for sure, but I think the next step is it'll go before the governor. And of course, he can make or break it. We'll see how much influence is going on in Tallahassee. Sorry for this lengthy time, but we thought it was very important. And as I mentioned, didn't give it to really talk about this much, but this affects not just Floridians. This affects anyone that visits the state of Florida. If you're visiting the state of Florida, and Florida has one of the highest tourist populations in the country, even from around the world because of Orlando, Disney World, etc., the beaches. You fall victim to this. If your loved one dies as a result of a medical malpractice in the state of Florida, you won't have anything you can do about it either. If they are unmarried, 25 or older, and have no children that are minors. Think about this. This bill matters to everyone here in the United States. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you for being a part of our broadcast today. God bless you, and we'll talk to you later this evening.